Sound 1. In 1870, a single German cannon could fire a shell further, faster, and more accurately than anything the French army had ever seen. The French had more soldiers. They had more experience. They had the home advantage. None of it mattered, because the Germans had Krupp. One family, one city, one factory that produced more steel, more cannons, more weapons than entire nations combined. The Krupp family didn't just arm the German military. They built it. They defined it. For over 300 years, every war Germany fought was fought with Krupp steel. This is their story, and it begins not with a cannon, but with a single iron pot. The city of Essen, Western Germany, 1587. Arndt Krupp was a merchant, not a soldier, not a nobleman. A merchant who sold goods in the marketplace. But Arndt had a skill. He could look at iron and see what it could become. When the Black Death swept through Essen in 1599, most merchants fled. Arndt stayed and bought up the properties of those who didn't survive. He was ruthless. He was patient. He was calculating. These were not virtues the church celebrated, but they were exactly what built an empire. His descendants took what he started and made it bigger, always bigger. But the man who truly transformed the Krupp name into something the world would never forget was born in 1787. Friedrich Krupp. Friedrich had one obsession: cast steel. At the time, cast steel, strong, flexible, consistent, was a British secret. The British made the best steel in the world, and they intended to keep it that way. Friedrich spent his entire fortune trying to crack the formula. He failed. Repeatedly. He went bankrupt. Twice. His wife left him. His friends thought he was mad. He died in 1826, penniless and broken, convinced he had achieved nothing. He was wrong. His 14-year-old son Alfred inherited a failing factory, 7 workers, and his father's obsession was steel. Alfred Krupp. History would call him the Cannon King. But when he started, he had nothing. 14 years old. A broken factory. Workers who hadn't been paid in months. And a formula for cast steel that almost worked. Alfred fixed the formula. It took years of grinding, obsessive work. 16-hour days. 7 days a week. Alfred slept in the factory. He ate in the factory. He lived in the factory. By the 1840s, the Krupp factory in Essen was producing the finest cast steel in Europe. Better than the British. Better than anyone. But Alfred wasn't interested in selling steel. He was interested in selling what steel could become. First, seamless railway wheels. The railways were exploding across Europe. Every railway needed wheels. Krupp wheels never broke. Competitors' wheels broke constantly, sometimes fatally. Orders poured in from across the continent. Then steel springs, steel axles, steel beams. Every industrial need of the 19th century. Krupp could meet it better than anyone else. But Alfred's real obsession wasn't railways. It was guns. In 1851, Alfred Krupp took a 2,000-pound cast steel cannon to the Great Exhibition in London, the largest single piece of cast steel ever made. The world stopped and stared. No one had ever seen anything like it. Queen Victoria came to look at it. Military officers from a dozen nations crowded around it. Everyone understood what they were seeing. The future of warfare. Made of German steel. In Essen. But ironically, nobody bought it. Not yet. The Prussian military looked at Alfred's steel cannons and said, "We prefer bronze." The French military said, "We prefer iron." The British military said, "We prefer our own." Alfred kept making them anyway. He knew something they didn't. The proof came in 1866. The Austro-Prussian War. Prussia armed its artillery with Krupp steel breech-loading cannons. Austria used older muzzle-loading guns. The battle lasted 7 weeks. Prussia won so decisively that historians call it the 7 Weeks' War. The Krupp cannon had just announced itself to the world. Then came 1870, the Franco-Prussian War. France was the dominant military power in Western Europe. Napoleon III commanded one of the most experienced armies on the continent. They expected to win quickly. They had never faced Krupp steel. The Krupp breech-loading steel cannon could fire 6 rounds per minute. The French cannons fired 2. The Krupp shell could reach targets 2 kilometers beyond French artillery range. French guns were firing at empty ground, while Krupp shells were already landing. French positions that should have held for days fell in hours. The Battle of Sedan, September 1870. Emperor Napoleon III himself was captured. The entire French army surrounded and forced to surrender. It was the most decisive military victory in European history since Waterloo. And it was built on Krupp steel. Every government in Europe immediately sent delegations to Essen. They all wanted the same thing: Krupp cannons. Alfred Krupp had just become the most important arms dealer in the world. After 1870, the Krupp factory in Essen was no longer just a factory. It was a city within a city. Alfred built houses for his workers, schools, hospitals, churches, stores. A complete community, all owned by Krupp, all dependent on Krupp. At its peak, the Krupp works employed over 20,000 people in Essen alone. The smoke from the furnaces never stopped, day and night, year after year. Alfred Krupp died in 1887. He left behind the largest industrial enterprise in the world, and a son named Friedrich Alfred, who would make it even bigger. But there was a problem growing beneath the surface of all this power. The Krupp family sold weapons to everyone: France, Russia, Turkey, Japan, anyone with money and a war to fight. They sold cannons to nations that would eventually use those cannons against Germany. Alfred had a rule about this. He called it the business of war, not the politics of war. He was selling steel, not choosing sides. That distinction became harder to maintain as the 20th century approached, because the weapon Krupp was now developing would make every previous cannon look like a toy. Big Bertha, a howitzer so massive it had to be transported by 36 horses and assembled on site. It fired shells weighing nearly a ton. It could destroy a reinforced concrete fortress with a single shot. Big Bertha wasn't named after a character or a place. It was named after Alfred Krupp's granddaughter, Bertha Krupp, the woman who would inherit the entire empire. By 1914, when the guns of Europe started firing, most of those guns were Krupp. On both sides. The family that had started with a merchant buying plague property in Essen in 1599 had become the armory of the modern world. Psalm 67. Iron, steel, fire, war. From Arminius's bog iron in the Teutoburg forest, to Charlemagne's cavalry, to the Teutonic Knights, to the Landsknecht's arquebus, to Krupp's steel cannon. Psalm 68. The same thread, the same story. A people defined by what they made with metal. Psalm 69. Next time, the thread leads straight into the trenches. Psalm 70. World War I. Germany's most sophisticated war machine yet, and the war that destroyed it. Psalm 71. Machine guns, poison gas, U-boats, Zeppelins, the industrialization of death. Psalm 72. That's episode 7. On Bloodlines of History. Subscribe. Because the steel is about to meet the mud.